Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Have our next topic related to nanoscience and nanotechnology. I think you must have heard about this a lot. So I thought I'll keep it a little simple. The second one, first one was overdose of hydrogen. Second, who was the first scientist to have talked about nanoscience? Not the term actually. Feynman. Because this is a famous statement which he made in his 1959 lecture. There's plenty of room at the bottom. So he didn't specifically mention the word, but the idea was there in his talk. And even though we talk a lot about, we have been talking about nanotechnology or using nanotechnology and discussing nanoscience in the last 1 or 2 decades, but this is something which was already existing in the sense, if any of you have visited or if you have seen any images of medieval period stained glass windows, these are glass windows where nanoparticles were used as paints. And even if you have visited or seen this famous cup in the British Museum, these are actually nanoparticle coating, and it changes color with the light incident on it. So these properties are can happen only with nanostructured materials, and that is what we are going to see. How does it change? What does it change or why is it different from the bulk, which we all know? So these are some of the early uses of nanotechnology. This is a famous plate where you have silver metals and copper metals somewhere between 5 to 100 billionth of a meter in the nanometer level. And these particles are responsible for light to bounce off at different wavelengths. So depending on the size of the particles, the light which is incident is bounced off at different wavelengths, and that is responsible for the colors which you see in all these pieces which we saw. Now, nanoparticles are all around us. Some of them can be naturally occurring, some of them are engineered. Naturally occurring in cases where, if you have read or observed volcanic ashes, these are nothing but they have nanoparticle structure in very small dimensions. Man-made particles, especially in lab level and IC integrated chips, you engineer materials at the nano level to get specific properties. So they are actually all around us. Incidental nanoparticles is something which, so the one which I mentioned in the previous slide, in case of volcanoes, these are incidental nanoparticles, even though they are naturally occurring nanoparticles. So in the process, nanoparticles are generated and you have nanostructured materials in the volcanic ashes. Engineered nanoparticles are more specifically made in laboratory or industry level for different applications. Some of them are called coarse shell materials, where you have a shell of a different material. Inside the core is a different material, and all these within that nanometer scale. Now, nature you have a few more materials which have nanostructures dimension. What are these? What is that red one? It's an RBC. This is eye of fly. That is a human red blood cell which is 7,000 nanometers wide. human hair. This is a magnified image of a human hair which is 50,000 to 100,000 nanometers. So if you see, we have nanometers everywhere. That is nanometer, this is nanometer. But before we go into what is so special about that dimension which we are mentioning, you need to know why or how we can see at that level. How do we even know that the dimension is nanometer? Only when you see that. Okay, somebody tells you that there is a nanomaterial here, how will you believe that it's a nanomaterial unless you see? Microscopes are something which you have used optical microscopes for viewing an onion cell or some slides. What is the source of light which is used? What is the wavelength which you use there? Visible light. Okay. Why? Why don't you use X-rays for cells, for viewing those cells? So you use visible light to see the cells in the slides. Can you use the same visible light to see the atoms here or nanostructures here? Why? Wavelength is greater. That is what you said, is it? Okay. So the thing is, the wavelength of the probing light should be of the same order, similar order as that of the material under investigation. So if you use a visible light, you won't be able to see these atoms. That is why we use electrons. So when you compare electronic wavelength, the wavelength of electron wavelength is of a similar order as that of nanostructures on nanometer scale, or the atomic size which we want to see. So we use electrons, and that is why using these electrons, different types of microscopes, electron microscopes instead of optical microscopes were developed so that you can magnify the images and go down to that level and see the nanostructures or even atoms for that matter. So STM, TEM are different types of electron microscopes. This is something called scanning tunneling microscope, transmission electron microscope. We will not go into detail, but I'll do discuss the working principle of one of these microscopes. So if you have a very short wavelength, the resolution is very high. They can be easily focused by electromagnetic lens, and they interact strongly with matter. These are the certain advantages when you use electron wavelength as a probing wavelength for nanostructures. Okay, now take a guess. What do you see here? What is that? Skin of a leaf. Okay, so this is a magnified image of leaf cross section. Very good. Who was that? So pollen grain. Again, it's a magnified image of a pollen grain. Huh? Amazon forest. Bacteria. Huh? Breadboard. Oh, spores. Any other guesses? I don't have the right answer, so I want some more. These are copper oxide nanostructures grown on some substrate. Okay. So you can see the magnification which it has gone up to. You can see only when these are chemically vapor deposited structures. This is the eye of a confocal image of with fluorescence. These are actually atoms in I think lanthanum columns. So this is using STEM, scanning tunneling electron microscope. So electrons are powerful tools which can be used to probe even atomic sized particles or at subatomic size level structures. What exactly is nanoscience? So now that we have seen, the nanoscience deals primarily with these type of materials which are at the nanometer level. What is the range, specific range for the nanometers? We'll see in the next few slides. So it basically deals with the synthesis, characterization, using, it can be any type of characterization, optical, morphological, microstructural characterization, spectroscopic characterization, exploration and exploitation, that is using that, which again overlaps little bit with the nanotechnology. Now we have been seeing nanometer everywhere, but any size for that matter, even this I can write it in nanometer scale. Can I, or I can write this as some nanometer, but will that make it a nanomaterial? Why? Why? That's what, that is what I'm showing you here. Huh? So properties of materials are very different at that level. Okay, why specifically 1 to 100 is because in this is if you study many different materials and you will arrive at certain scale, which is not a very strict definition, but a definition of the dimension where the properties of the material change. Okay, change as compared to the bulk material. So in most of the materials, it has been seen that this dimension is between 1 to 100 nanometer. It can be plus minus some other length dimension also, but this is the most widely used, most widely seen dimension for most of the materials where the properties tend to change. If you compare the dimensions, you'll see this is that for a tryptophan, it's only 1 nanometer molecular size antibody, and you go back to mouse also, you can keep write it as nanometers. In this case, it's millimeter, but this is just for comparison. So nanometer till here, 1 to 100 nanometer. If the particle size is somewhere between this, we call it as a nanostructured material. If you again compare some of the naturally occurring nanostructured materials or species with the other side, you will see the the length scale. Human hair is micrometer level. This is also micrometer. If you go only to DNA, you will see a nanometer scale within that 1 to 100 nanometer. Okay. So these are some of the man-made structures which are available. Again, this is a carbon nanotube, only 2 nanometers diameter. Okay, but if you come to micro electromechanical devices, it is 2 microns. So this is a table just to compare the dimensions. Human fingernail actually can grows 1 nanometer every second. So try seeing whether you can see a nanometer. Okay, can you see that? No. Okay. So this is just to give you an idea of how small or big a nanometer is. So as I mentioned, the particles, the properties of these nanomaterials are different from the bulk. Why is it different? Because when you talk about macro scale or bulk, you will see that most of the atoms or particles are inside the material. The surface is smaller as compared to the volume. So surface by volume ratio, if you can actually calculate the surface to volume ratio, will be lower. Most of the atoms are inside, very few on the surface compared to what is there in the inside of the material. But if you go to a nanometer nanostructured material, you will see that the number of or the atoms, density of atoms on the surface is comparable or more than what is there inside. So if you calculate the surface to volume ratio here, it will be very high. So what happens when that is high? What changes? When that is high, when you have a large surface to volume ratio, what happens is there's something called quantum size effect. This is one of the effects which can come into play. There are other effects which come into play when it is a nanomaterial. When the surface atoms are very high and the surface to volume ratio is very high, you have something called dangling bonds which are very high in number. What are these dangling bonds? For example, if you see these inside atoms, they are all connected to each other. So let's say if I have carbon and carbon has 4 valency, all these 4 hands of carbon are filled in the inside. When it is at the surface, 1 or 2 of these hands are free. So if it's free, we call that as dangling bond. So if you have more surface atoms, you will have more dangling bonds. If you have dangling bond or an empty seat, anybody can come and sit here. So what does it mean? The seat is available for everybody. So it becomes more reactive. The material becomes more reactive. You want to come and sit? No. That is up to the material with which it is reacting, but it becomes reactive. So in bulk case, even if it is not reacting or it was not very reactive, it will become reactive. It may become reactive when it is in the nanostructured form. So that's why, and that leads to a whole lot of changes in property and characteristic of the material. Quantum size effect is one of those effects which you see if you calculate the surface to volume ratio, you will see that it is proportional to 1 by R. Okay, inversely proportional to R. So basically, if you keep on reducing the size, properties change. What are those properties which change? We will see now. So basically, surface atoms play a very important role in the thermodynamic properties of the materials, and there is a tremendous increase in surface energy. So as I said just now, there are more and more number of dangling bonds and they can become very reactive. So this is a surface energy. At the surface, it has very high reactivity. The surface reactivity is very high. Now, you can, based on their dimension, you can actually classify them into 3 wide classifications. First one is if all the 3 dimensions are restricted, that is in all 3 dimensions, the dimensions within 1 to 100, then it's a one-dimensional material. For example, quantum dots. It's restricted along all 3 dimensions. All 3 dimensions, it is within 1 to 100 nanometers. Nano shells, you can avoid this. It should not be there. Nano rings. So these are all one-dimensional material or zero-dimensional material. Zero-dimensional materials or quantum dots. If it is restricted in 2 dimensions, that means in one it is more than 1 to 100, but the other 2 dimensions it is less than 100. In that case, this is a one-dimensional nanomaterial. Nanotubes, wires, fibers, all these are one-dimensional, zero-dimensional. And then if it is restricted in only along 1 dimension, that is, this is a film. That means both the other 2, like X and Y, it can have larger dimension, but along Z, it is within 1 to 100. Okay, so that means it has a very thin layer, and that is where we call it as, those are the ones we call it as thin films. The surface to volume ratio is very high for thin films. Layers, coatings, all of these fall between, within a 2-dimensional material. So this is a thin film. Remember, this is restricted along 2 dimensions, this is restricted only along 1 dimension, and this is restricted along, zero-dimensional material is restricted along all the 3 dimensions. So there is zero-dimensional nanomaterial or quantum dots example. 1-dimensional nanomaterial example is nanotube or nanowires. 2-dimensional nanomaterials examples are thin films. Okay, so these are basically a classification based on the dimension. examples of man-made nanoparticles. Perfect examples you can see is a graphene quantum dot. Okay, it's a 0 dimension restricted in all the 3 dimensions. Nanotubes, carbon nanotubes, which is restricted along 2. So it has a 1-dimensional structure. Graphene is a sheet, a single sheet of graphite is graphene. Okay, graphite again, you have a 3-dimensional structure. That means you have 2-dimensional layers but stacked along 3D. Then you have carbon nanoribbons. Nanoribbons again 1-dimensional material. So these are man-made nanostructures used for different applications. Now, if you take just to know the importance or significance of this number, what changes and why it changes. If you have a cube of size 1 meter, you have 1 cube of size 1 meter, the surface area is 6 meters square. If you break it down into 0.01 meters, which is 1 centimeter, you can, the number of cubes which you have, if you calculate, is 10 to the 6 or 1 million cubes. And the collective surface area will be 600 meter square. But if you bring it down to 1 nanometer, how does it change? You can have 10 to the power 27 cubes. If you calculate, it will be of the area of 6,000 kilometers square. What? Give me an example. How do you imagine 6,000 kilometers square? Size of whole country? Okay. So this is how small is a nano. So basically, so imagine if it is like that, what is the change in surface area it can have when you break down a single cube to 1 nanometer, from 1 meter to 1 nanometer. So that is a huge change, and when you have such a huge change of surface area, the surface reactivity is very high because there are enormous dangling bonds present there to react with something. Okay. Now coming to why the electronic properties change. So you have bulk and you have atom. So when you have, when you talk about a single atom, okay, when you talk about a single atom, we talk about energy levels, separated energy levels. When you talk about a single atom and n equal to 1, n equal to 2, we talk about separated electronic energy levels. When you talk about bulk, you have continuous bands. Okay, conduction band, valence band. This is what we know about a bulk. When we talk about nanoparticles, the energy levels are discrete. They are not continuous. Okay, because it is somewhere between, very close to not a single atom, but closer to a lower dimensional material. The energy level for a nanoparticles are actually discrete within the same band. These are not continuous levels. Why is it discrete? Discrete means it's not a continuous band. Why is it discrete? Because the dimension is restricted. So if you know something about a string being restricted at the 2 ends, and let's say if you pluck a string in between which is restricted at the 2 ends, it will vibrate with certain frequencies which are discrete frequencies. Not all frequencies are allowed. When you have a string which has a restricted movement, that is you are holding the string at 2 ends and you pluck it somewhere at the center or wherever within, it will vibrate. It will vibrate with some frequencies, but it cannot have all the allowed frequencies. Okay, you know about fundamental frequency, first harmonic, second harmonic, those are discrete frequencies. Frequency means you can correlate it with energy, nu, h nu. Okay, so that means, what does that mean? If there is a restricted system, you can have only discrete energies. Discrete frequencies means discrete energies of the system. So whenever you restrict a system, you are not free to move. Okay, If you are restricted in your chair, you are not free to move. So similarly, when a nanoparticle or an electron inside a nanoparticle is restricted, it is not free to move. It will have only certain allowed energies. Okay, and that changes the electronic structure of the material, and that is what you see here. It has discrete energy levels instead of continuous bands. Compared to the bulk particle, actually, if you see at the electronic structure, the band gap will be little wider in case of nanoparticles. Okay, and that is what we, and this confinement or restriction is what is called a quantum confinement. Okay, so for that to occur, the size should be within a specific size. It can't be any number or nanometer. It has to be a specific size. What size it is? The size is called the de Broglie wavelength of that particle. Okay. So what is quantum confinement? Quantum confinement is observed when the size of the particle is too small to be comparable to wavelength of an electron. You can calculate the wavelength of an electron from the energy. If the energy is given, kinetic energy is given, you can calculate the wavelength of electron and you know the rest mass. So associated de Broglie wavelength is somewhere 1.23 nanometers. So if the particle is close to that size only, you will see quantum confinement. So quantum confinement, you will see that the band gap increases with respect to the bulk. Okay, that when the band gap increases with respect to bulk, you will see that, and that happens only at certain dimensions, certain smaller and smaller dimensions. When the band gap increases, what is supposed to happen? It will change the electronic property, optical property, the light which is being absorbed by the material, that will change. So the color of the sample may also change depending on the particle you are looking at. So even if you have a material which is in bulk case shows a certain band gap, when you construct the same material in nanostructured form, you will see that as the size decreases, first thing is this splitting happens. This discrete energy levels come because of the confinement, and because of this confinement and the energy level splitting, you will also see a widening in the band gap. This widening in the band gap is responsible for all the changes which you see at the electronic level and in the optical property of the material. For example, if you see here, this is a quantum dot, cadmium selenide quantum dot. If you make these particles in the dimension of about 5 nanometer to 1.5 nanometer and excite it with a UV lamp, that UV lamp because it correlates with the energy it has, the band gap energy it has. You will see that different sizes of these cadmium sulfide particles will give you different colors, because for each of these sizes the band gap is different. Okay, and that this happens closer to the de Broglie wavelength. De Broglie wavelength, which we calculated in the previous slide. So that if the particle is close to that, the change in particle size, it shows different colors. Okay. Now, this is about the electronic or related optical properties. You will see similar effects, not similar, but in a very different effect, even when you consider magnetic property of the sample. So, if you have a magnetic material, you will see that in some cases, when it is in bulk form, the size of the domain is, let's say, 1 micrometer. What is a domain? In a magnetic material, domain is a part of the sample where all the molecular dipoles are arranged in a similar fashion. Okay, in the same direction. That is a single domain. A magnetic material can be made up of many more domains. So if the size of a single domain is around 1 micrometer, and when you keep on decreasing the size of the material from bulk towards nano, you will see that at certain size, okay, at nanoscale, due to quantum confinement or the confinement of the particle or electron in that, it will show an effect which is called a giant magnetoresistance effect. And this is a fundamental nano effect. Only when the size of the particle, magnetic particle decreases, you will see a GMR. Giant magnetoresistance, where if you have two spins in one direction, the resistance is very low. And if the spin is in two different directions, the resistance is very high. There is a giant leap in the resistance. So that is a giant magnetoresistance effect. But that is seen only when you have a confined magnetic material. Okay, that means you see a nanostructured, a magnetic material which is synthesized in nanostructured form. You don't see this in bulk form. Okay, all these are related to the electronic changes which is happening in the material when it is made into a nanostructured form. Okay. So other than these two properties which we have seen, there are many different properties which can change depending on the size, depending on the material you are looking at. We already saw electrical conductivity will change. Why? Because you have changes in band gap. What do you see? You see the band gap changing. Okay, so that will also affect the electrical conductivity, magnetic property. Other than GMR, you can have other different effects. For example, magnetic coercivity, or let's say magnetic properties change, mechanical properties, optical properties. Obviously, we saw in the last slide. Catalytic activity will change because there is a very high surface to volume ratio. So when you increase the surface area, obviously active sites where the reaction will take place will increase. So that increases so if it's a catalysis, a catalytic particle, when you make it in a nanostructured form, the catalytic efficiency also increases because surface area is very high now. Biological barriers or membranes also increase because the surface area is high, there is an increased permeability when you have biological materials being synthesized in nanostructured form. So when you have, so this is all about nanoscience. What happens when you make it into a nanostructured materials? When you apply this to create any devices or you manipulate atoms and molecules, all these come under nanotechnology. Nanoscience being applied to the technology. So what are the different applications based on these changes which you see? They are used in energy, catalysis, textiles, environment, medicine, electronics, food and packaging, as well as automobiles. So all the possible sectors which you can think of, you will be able to apply nanotechnology. Textiles, you have heard of anti-wrinkle. Okay, what are those? So they have hydrophobic coating. They actually mimic what is there in the lotus leaf. If you see a lotus leaf, if you are able to magnify a lotus leaf, and you will see that it is there, it's actually not a coating. We think it's a wax coating or something like that. Basically, it's a structure. There are microstructures like this. So because of these microstructures on the surface of the leaf, the wettability, that means when the water falls on that, the contact angle changes because there are fine microstructures on that. The contact angle of the water droplet on that is such that it doesn't stick to it. Okay, the wettability is very low. So that is how it slips on that. So it's actually a nanostructuring of the surface. And that is what, if you see in some textiles, they mimic that type of structure and give rise to what is called non-wrinkle or wrinkle-free textiles. Again, catalysis I've mentioned, we have seen in hydrogen production itself how you can increase the active surface sites when you increase the surface area whenever surface to volume ratio is high, and that can lead to higher active sites, which leads to higher efficiency in catalysis. Now coming to nano remediation, one of the applications of nanoscience and nanotechnology is in remediation of air and water pollution. How can you do that? You have n number of particles which we have seen initially. Activated carbon. What is activated carbon? Again, it's carbon, yes. Then why do you call it as activated carbon? Yeah, so it's basically you're increasing the surface area of the particle. So activated carbon is widely used in adsorption. In wastewater treatment, it's used widely in adsorption because the porosity is very high. Okay, surface area is very high. That is one of the materials. There are different other materials which you see, which we mentioned, carbon related nanomaterials, fullerenes, graphene, CNTs in water treatment. And similar nanoparticles can also be used for heavy metal removals in soil, water. Okay. Electronics, all of us are aware, the thinner or the smaller the material size or the chips which you can see, you can store more and more data in those chips now to get better application in electronics. Now, in medicine, there is one specific example which I want you to know. So we have something called hyperthermia treatment, where you introduce nanoparticles through drug delivery. It's called drug delivery with the help of nanoparticles. These are iron-based nanoparticles, magnetic nanoparticles is inserted in the bloodline, and with the application of an external magnet, you can actually create heat locally. So when it reaches a particular tumor cell, and you can use a local heating with the help of external magnet, it can destroy the tumor cells locally, and that is what is hyperthermia for treating cancer cells using magnetic nanoparticles. And that is one very important material where, application where you can use nanoparticles for health applications. So we have seen what is nanoscience. We have also seen some of the applications. How do you synthesize and design nanoparticles? Why I use the word design is because you know specifically 1 to 100 nanometer is something which we are looking at, not exactly 100 nanometers. There's always a plus minus a few nanometers there, but the basic idea is we want to design a material which has a different property and possibly more advantages for the nano applications which we need. So we need to design materials, especially man-made or engineered nanoparticles. You need to design nanostructures. Two basic methods are, or the classification which you can think of is bottom-up and top-bottom approach. So bottom-up is nothing but atom by atom or molecule by molecule built up from building blocks. There are various methods. Most common of it is nanocrystal synthesis, vapor deposition, sol gel. These are some of the chemical methods, as well as physical vapor or chemical vapor deposition methods which you can have. It involves both physical and chemical approaches. We are not going into detail of for those techniques, but this is something which is bottom up. You start from nucleation, heterostructure nucleation or homostructure nucleation, and then it can lead to nanostructure particles. The other one is top down, where you start from the bulk material itself and break it down to nano. Lithography is one of the examples. Etching, ball milling techniques. These are some of the examples where you break down the material. So you take the bulk material and design or arrive at a size which you want depending on the application which you need. So when you make it into a nano form or you're synthesizing nanomaterials, you will see that every bulk material when you synthesize will not have a same structure or morphology or microstructure when you are synthesizing it in nano form. Why is it so? Because the parameters of the synthesis parameters or the conditions under which you synthesize are different. So, and for every synthesis condition, the free energy is going to be different, and depending on that, you can have different morphologies or microstructures for the same material. So, if you see here, TiO2 nanostructure itself can be synthesized into different structures. Okay, you name it and it's there. So, n number of different desired morphologies can be there for these bulk materials. And obviously, when you want to look at these nanostructures, as I mentioned before in the first few initial slides, how do you probe these? You probe it using the more energetic electrons, okay, because the wavelength is of the order of dimension of these nanomaterials. Okay, just like you can't use a small scale to measure the height of this building, okay, you need to have a better measuring tool to measure the height of a building. So similarly, you can't use visible light to see nanoparticles or to observe nanoparticles. You need to have a wavelength or a more energetic particle to observe these. So, as I mentioned initially, we have some electron microscopes which utilize this property of electron to investigate these nanoparticles. Now, all these electron microscopes have a basic setup. This is one of those. What I've shown you here is a basic schematic, a simple schematic of scanning electron microscope. So, scanning electron microscope, you have an electron gun. So, this is a thermionic emission which is happening. You heat the tungsten filament which will emit electron. The electrons are actually guided by these magnetic lens which you have here. And then they fall on the sample which is to be investigated. When it falls on the sample, it gets scattered. So you have backscattered, you have other scattered electrons also. There's something called, so there's a secondary electron detector which you see here, which is capturing these backscattered electrons. Since the beam interacted with your sample, this backscattered electron will actually carry information about your sample, how the surface looks like, what is the morphology of the sample. And that is what is captured in the image which you see. And since you can scan this, it's called a scanning electron microscope. So anywhere on the sample, if you want to look at the morphology at one end of the sample, you can do that, or at the center of the sample, it's possible. So it's scanning electron microscope. You need slightly conducting materials for that. If you don't have conducting material, you basically coat a very thin layer of gold or any conducting metal on that to investigate your sample. So this is one of the possible characterization where you can look at the morphology. There are others like transmission electron microscope where you can see the inside of the sample, where you use very thin samples and where it can actually transmit the electron. Okay. Okay, so let me stop with few more slides basically related to the toxicity concern. So we've been talking about nanoparticles, nanostructures, how nanoscience, how good is it for us, but we should also be aware of the fact that there are cases where there are concerns about nanotoxicity, especially because the size is so small that they can even penetrate blood-brain barrier. And this is a barrier which actually protects the brain from harmful chemicals. So if the size is so small that it can actually cross this barrier, it is a matter of concern. So that is something which we need to be aware of. There are human implications for this. Toxicity is not well understood when it comes to nanoparticles. You do have certain contradictory reports in research if you look around. And obviously, there are environmental implications because you can have water and soil contamination if it's not properly disposed of. Okay. So yes, this is all about nanoscience and nanotechnology. Has lot of scope. I know that everything around us in some way or the other involves nanostructures and nanotechnology, but it's something which you should be more aware of. These are some of the emerging technologies. So if you are really interested in research on these topics, you can take up any of these in future, because especially the ones related to semiconductor, because that is where Indian government is now funding in future. Thank you. So I'll take up, we can have few questions now. You want? Yes.
You talk about that cloth design such that water is not stable. But there could also be oil stains and other such stains.
Yeah, so strain-free textiles are available. See, there are two types of textiles which are available. One is you have hydrophobic coatings. So if it's hydrophobic coatings or similar coatings where there is just a coating, you will not be able, it is wrinkle-free and it is stain-free in that case. In this case, the wrinkle-free ones, what I showed you are specific textiles where the microstructure is different. So the surface itself is such a is structured in such a way that you have the point of contact, the wet angle is different, is very different. So the wettability is very less. You can actually measure the contact angle when water droplet falls on any surface. You can measure a contact angle. So that contact angle is very less when you construct these nanostructures. So that is how this textile works. There are others like which you mentioned. You have coatings where it is hydrophobic or stain-free coatings. So those are basically coatings and maybe a thin film, you can say. Anything? Tired? Okay, so shall we stop? Thank you. You've been a lovely audience.
Well, that was an insightful lecture. Ma'am, you gracefully connected electrolysis, a topic we are well acquainted with, to various high-end ideas, such as the different types of hydrogen, wastewater-fed hydrogen production, and PFCs, concepts which are of utmost importance to our generation, especially amidst the current global imbroglio involving resources, highlighting the urgent need for alternate fuels. We all enjoyed the part about nanoscience as well, and I'm sure guessing the microscopic entity from the pictures was everyone's favorite part of the day. Hats off to you, ma'am, and let's thank her with a round of applause.